When I walked into that courtroom, my hands were shaking. I kept looking at the door, hoping to see my parents walk in. But they never did. I searched the faces around me, but all I saw were strangers. The people I thought would stand by me had turned their backs. I was scared, embarrassed, and completely alone. The judge's voice echoed through the room, and every word felt like another reminder that I was on my own. My lawyer whispered something I didn't even hear. All I could think about was how quickly love disappears when life gets hard. I wasn't angry yet, just numb. The kind of numb that comes when you realize you mean less to the people you love than their reputation does. When the trial ended, I walked out alone. No one waiting outside. No one asking if I was okay. I remember standing on the courthouse steps, watching families hug and cry together, while I had no one. I promised myself then, I'd never let anyone make me feel that small again. The days that followed were quiet and heavy. I went back to my small apartment, where the walls felt like they were closing in. My phone stayed silent. My mom didn't call. My dad didn't text. They had made it clear, I was on my own. I didn't have money, I didn't have friends, and honestly, I didn't even have hope. But I had anger, and sometimes that's enough to keep you moving. So I worked. I worked jobs that most people would turn down. I saved every penny I could. I spent my nights reading, learning, and trying to figure out how to rebuild from nothing. Every time I wanted to quit, I remembered the look on my parents' faces, cold, distant, like I was already gone to them. That pain pushed me harder than anything else ever could. Years passed, and life slowly started to change. I found my way into a new world, one where people respected effort more than last names. I didn't talk about my past, and I didn't let anyone close enough to hurt me again. I just kept building. And then one morning, I woke up and realized something. I had done it. I had made it. The kind of success people spend their whole lives chasing. It didn't make me happy, not at first. But it gave me peace. I had built everything they said I couldn't. So when I drove that $200,000 Lamborghini down the same road where my parents once told me I was a disappointment, I wasn't doing it to show off. I was doing it to remind myself that I survived, that I was enough, even when no one believed in me. And when the people who once ignored me turned their heads and stared, I didn't smile out of pride. I smiled because I finally. Ethan Cole was only 21 when his life began to fall apart. He had just started his first real job, excited to prove himself and make his parents proud. But one morning, everything changed. His boss accused him of being part of a financial fraud scheme. Money had gone missing from the company's accounts, and somehow, Ethan's name was on the documents. He tried to explain that he didn't even have access to those files, but no one wanted to listen. The news spread quickly. His co-workers avoided him, whispering behind his back. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with people asking questions, but the worst call came from home. When he answered, his father's voice was cold. "Is it true?" Robert asked. Ethan tried to explain, but before he could finish, his father said, "You brought shame to our name. Don't come home." The line went dead. He thought maybe his mother, Marilyn, would understand. He went home that night, hoping she'd let him explain face to face. But when she opened the door, she didn't even let him in. She just stood there, arms crossed, eyes full of disappointment. "Your father's right," she said quietly. "We can't have people thinking we raised a thief." Ethan felt the world collapse under his feet. He begged them to believe him, but she closed the door, leaving him standing outside with his bag in hand. For days, he didn't know where to go. He slept in his car in an empty parking lot behind a grocery store. The seats were hard, and the nights were cold. He would stare up through the windshield, wondering how everything went so wrong so fast. He had no money, no family, and nowhere to turn. The people he thought would protect him were the first to throw him away. The police questioned him several times. Each time he said the same thing, he didn't do it. But the evidence kept pointing in his direction. The company claimed they found his login details on the stolen files. He didn't even understand how that was possible. It felt like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. As the case grew bigger, Ethan's name became a punchline in town. Old friends stopped replying to his texts. His girlfriend, who had once promised to stand by him, sent a short message saying, "I can't do this." He sat in his car reading those words over and over until the screen went blurry with tears. He tried to stay strong, but the silence around him hurt more than anything. The hardest part wasn't losing his job or his reputation. It was realizing his parents never even tried to believe him. Every night, he thought about knocking on their door again, hoping they'd open it this time. But deep down, he knew they wouldn't. All he had left was himself, his car, and the quiet belief that one day, somehow, the truth would come out. Understood. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. The court case went on for months, and each day felt heavier than the one before. Ethan would walk into the courtroom surrounded by people, yet he had never felt more alone. Every time he looked around, he saw families sitting together, whispering to their loved ones, offering comfort and support. But when it came to him, there was no one. No one to sit beside him. No one to say, "It's going to be okay." His lawyer barely made eye contact anymore. At first, the man had been confident, saying they would clear things up soon. But as the case dragged on, his tone changed. Now, he just looked tired and distant, flipping through files without emotion. Ethan could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe in him anymore. It was as if everyone had already decided he was guilty before the verdict was even read. Then came Sophie. She had stood by him for the first few weeks, calling every night, telling him she believed him. But as the gossip grew, so did the distance between them. One afternoon, she came over, eyes red from crying. She couldn't even look at him. "Ethan, I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "Everyone thinks you did it. My parents don't want me around you. I can't be with a criminal." The word criminal hit him harder than any insult ever could. He tried to speak, to tell her he was innocent, but she was already walking away. Watching her leave felt like watching the last piece of his old life disappear. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. His phone stopped ringing completely. The same people who used to laugh with him at lunch now acted like he didn't exist. Messages were left unread. Calls went straight to voicemail. Ethan stopped trying. It hurt too much to keep reaching out only to be ignored. He started spending most of his time in silence. He would sit in the corner of his small apartment, staring at the wall, thinking about how quickly people could vanish when things went wrong. He wasn't angry at first, just empty. That kind of loneliness eats away at you, not because you miss the noise, but because you start doubting your own worth. Sometimes he'd walk through town just to remind himself that he was still there. People would glance his way, whisper, and turn their backs. He learned to keep his head down and move fast. He became invisible by choice. But deep down, under all that pain, something started to grow, a quiet determination. He promised himself that if he ever made it out of this, he'd never need anyone again. No friends, no family, no one to rely on. He would build himself from nothing, and next time, when people came. Months passed, and Ethan's life became a blur of hearings, paperwork, and endless waiting. Every time he entered the courtroom, people looked at him like they already knew he was guilty. The whispers, the stares, the pitying looks, they all made him feel smaller each day. He stopped expecting fairness. He just wanted it to end. Then, one night, while going through the old files from his job, he noticed something strange. It was a forwarded email he had saved months earlier, one he hadn't paid much attention to back then. The email mentioned a transfer of funds and had his ex-boss's digital signature attached to it. The date and details matched the time the fraud took place. But the strange part was that his own login was used hours after he had already clocked out that day. Ethan's heart started racing. He looked closer and realized this was it. The proof that someone had used his credentials after hours. He printed the email, added it to his pile of documents, and rushed to show his lawyer the next morning. The man looked surprised but still skeptical. "We'll see if it holds up," he muttered. When the day came to present it in court, Ethan sat silently as his lawyer handed the email to the judge. For the first time, the courtroom fell quiet. The company's representatives looked uneasy. The prosecutor asked for a moment to review it, and even from where Ethan sat, he could see the shift in their faces. The evidence was solid. It proved that Ethan couldn't have been the one behind the fraud. The next hour felt like a dream. The judge leaned forward, reviewed the documents, and finally spoke. "Based on the new evidence, all charges against Ethan Cole are dismissed." Those words echoed in Ethan's mind. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all the pain, all the loneliness, all the shame, it was over. He stepped outside the courthouse, breathing in the fresh air like it was the first time in years. People passed him by without a glance. No one came to congratulate him. There were no hugs, no smiles, no one waiting to take him home. His parents didn't call. His friends didn't text. The silence that had surrounded him for months stayed exactly the same. Ethan stood on the courthouse steps, looking at the sky. He thought clearing his name would bring relief, but instead it felt empty. The truth had set him free, but it couldn't erase what he had lost. Trust, love, belonging, all gone. He walked away that day not as the same man who had entered that courtroom months ago. Something inside him had hardened. He realized that being right didn't always mean people would stand by you. Sometimes, justice comes too late to heal the wounds it leaves behind. Looking for him, they would find someone they could never break again. After the court case ended, Ethan disappeared. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He packed a small bag, sold what little he had left, and drove away from the town that had broken him. There were no goodbyes, no plans, just silence. He didn't want to be found, and no one cared enough to look. The first few months were hard. Ethan took whatever work he could find, cleaning offices, delivering food, fixing computers for a few dollars. The pay was low, but it was honest. Every night, he came home to a small rented room with cracked walls and a thin mattress. He didn't mind. For the first time, he had peace. No judgment, no questions, no eyes watching him like he was a criminal. Just quiet. He saved every bit of money he could. While others spent their weekends relaxing, Ethan spent his studying. He watched free tutorials online, read about business, investing, and coding. He didn't have a teacher, but he had determination. Every mistake he made became a lesson. Every failure became fuel. The anger he once felt toward his parents and everyone who left him began to turn into focus. Time passed slowly, but Ethan stayed consistent. He learned how websites were built, how online businesses worked, and how small investments could grow over time. He'd sit at an old laptop late into the night, typing until his eyes burned. There were moments when he doubted himself, when loneliness crept in, but he never stopped. After about 2 years, Ethan used his savings to start something of his own, a small tech service that helped local companies manage their online systems. It wasn't much at first. He worked out of a shared workspace, surrounded by strangers who barely noticed him. But Ethan didn't need attention. He needed progress. He built everything from the ground up, slowly turning his pain into purpose. Some days, he'd think about his parents, wondering if they ever missed him or thought about calling. But then he'd remind himself that their silence was his freedom. It gave him the space to rebuild without expectations or pressure. One night, after finishing a long project for a client, he checked his bank account and stared in disbelief. The company had just made more money in 1 month than he used to make in an entire year. That was the moment it hit him. He had done it. He didn't shout or celebrate. He just sat there, smiling quietly. The years of struggle had shaped him into someone stronger, calmer, and wiser. He didn't owe his success to anyone. Every achievement, every small victory, was built by his own hands. In that silence, Ethan found something he never had before: control over his own life. He realized that sometimes disappearing isn't about running away. It's about giving yourself. Ethan's company started small, but everything changed one night when his new app went live. It was a simple idea, a tool that helped small businesses organize their finances easily. He didn't expect much, just hoped it would cover his bills. But within weeks, downloads skyrocketed. People loved how simple and effective it was. Reviews poured in, and soon bigger companies started noticing his work. At first, Ethan couldn't believe it. The same person who once slept in his car was now running a growing tech company. He hired a few employees, rented a proper office, and worked harder than ever. Each morning, he woke up before sunrise and didn't stop until long after midnight. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing peace, the kind that comes when you finally prove to yourself that you were never the failure people thought you were. As the app's popularity grew, investors began reaching out. They wanted to partner with him, offer funding, and help him expand. For the first time, people saw value in him, but this time, Ethan was careful. He didn't trust easily. Every deal he made was calculated, every decision thoughtful. He remembered how quickly trust could turn into betrayal. Within 2 years, his company became one of the most talked-about startups in the country. The success was surreal. When a major tech firm offered to buy it for $50 million, Ethan didn't hesitate. It wasn't just about the money. It was about closing a chapter that had started with so much pain. The day he signed the papers, he felt a calm he hadn't felt in years. After the sale, he moved to Miami. He bought a beautiful mansion overlooking the ocean, not to show off, but because he wanted a space that reminded him of how far he had come. The sound of waves at night became his peace. He decorated the house simply. No grand photos, no awards on display. Just quiet and light. Sometimes, while watching the sunset from his balcony, Ethan would think about that courtroom. The cold benches, the whispering crowd, the empty seats where his parents should have been. He remembered the feeling of standing there alone, wishing someone had just said, "I believe you." That memory never left him. Even with all his success, he didn't forget where he came from. The pain had shaped him. The loneliness had taught him strength. The betrayal had taught him focus. Every success he earned carried the weight of what he had lost. People often asked him what motivated him. He never gave the full answer. They wouldn't understand that his success wasn't about money or fame. It was about healing old wounds. It was proof that no matter how deep someone breaks you, you can rise, rebuild, and shine again, even if no one is there to clap for you. The space to become who you were always meant to be. One morning, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from a number he hadn't seen in years. It was his cousin, Mark. The message was simple. "Hey, I'm getting married next month. It would mean a lot if you came." Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. He hadn't been back to his hometown in years, not since the day he walked out of that courtroom. The thought of returning brought back memories he had buried deep. But after a few minutes, he replied, "I'll be there." The weeks passed quickly, and as the wedding day approached, Ethan decided he wouldn't fly or hire a driver. This time, he wanted to arrive on his own terms. He took the keys to his newest car, a sleek black $200,000 Lamborghini, and set out on the long drive. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but he didn't rush. Every mile felt like another layer of pain peeling away. When he finally crossed the old town sign, a strange feeling washed over him. The streets looked smaller, the buildings older, but the memories felt just as sharp. He passed by the grocery store where he used to work, the park where he once met Sophie, and finally, the courthouse, the same one where his parents never showed up. He slowed down for a moment, staring at the building in silence, then drove on. By the time he reached the wedding venue, people were already gathering outside. Laughter filled the air, music played softly, and the warm light from the hall spilled into the street. As soon as Ethan's car pulled up, everything went quiet. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The sound of the engine echoed through the silence. He stepped out of the car wearing a simple black suit, no flashy jewelry, no entourage. Just him. People who once gossiped about him years ago now whispered for a different reason. Some pretended not to stare, while others couldn't look away. He could almost hear the unspoken questions. Is that really Ethan Cole? The same guy who was accused of fraud? Ethan gave a polite smile and walked toward the entrance, his footsteps steady. Inside, his cousin greeted him with surprise and joy. "Man, you actually came," Mark said, hugging him tightly. Ethan smiled faintly. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. As the night went on, Ethan noticed familiar faces. Old neighbors, classmates, and even a few people from his past who once avoided him. Their expressions shifted between guilt and curiosity. Some approached him with nervous smiles, trying to make small talk as if nothing had ever happened. Ethan was kind but distant. He wasn't there for attention. He just wanted closure. When he stepped outside later that night, the cool air hit his face, and he looked around at the quiet streets. The same town that once called him a criminal was now speechless. He realized he didn't need their approval anymore. His presence alone was enough, not to prove a point, but to remind. The wedding was in full swing when Ethan saw them, his parents, standing near the edge of the room. For a moment, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. He hadn't seen them in years, not since the day they turned their backs on him. His mother looked older, her hair streaked with gray. His father stood beside her, shoulders slightly hunched, holding a glass he didn't drink from. Ethan froze where he was. The music, the laughter, the voices around him, all of it faded into the background. His heart started to race, not out of anger, but from the flood of memories that rushed back. He remembered the night they told him to leave, the door closing in his face, the silence that followed. Now here they were, looking straight at him, their eyes unsure. His mother was the first to move. She walked toward him slowly, her hands trembling as she reached out. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice breaking. "You look so grown up. We've been following your success. We're so proud of you." For a second, Ethan didn't say anything. He just looked at her, studying her expression. Her smile was small, forced, the kind that came from guilt, not pride. His father joined her, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Son, you've really made something of yourself," he said, trying to sound confident but failing. Ethan's eyes met his father's. There was no anger in them, just calm. He spoke quietly, but every word was sharp enough to cut through the noise of the party. "You're proud of me now?" he asked. "You were proud when I fell, not when I stood up." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The music continued in the background, but the people nearby had gone silent. Some pretended not to listen, but their eyes said otherwise. Ethan's mother's lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out. His father lowered his gaze, his face red with shame. Ethan didn't raise his voice or make a scene. He didn't need to. The truth had already done enough. He simply stood there, calm and composed, while the people who once judged him now watched in silence. He wasn't there to hurt them, just to make them see what they had done. His mother finally whispered, "We didn't know what to do back then. We thought we were protecting ourselves." Ethan gave a small nod. "I know," he said quietly. "You were protecting your name. I was protecting my truth." He turned to leave, but before walking away, he looked at them one last time. "I forgave you a long time ago," he said. "But I also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." Then he walked away, leaving them standing there under the soft glow of the wedding lights, surrounded by whispers and regret. For Ethan, it wasn't revenge. It was release. After all the years of pain and silence, he finally said what needed to be said, and that was enough. Himself, that he had survived everything they once doubted he could. When the music started playing again and people returned to dancing, Ethan quietly stepped outside. He didn't feel like celebrating. The night air was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain and fresh grass. The sky above was full of stars, but his mind was somewhere else. He had finally faced the people who broke him, and instead of satisfaction, all he felt was calm. He walked to his car parked at the edge of the lot. The Lamborghini shimmered under the lights, spotless and silent, waiting for him. As he opened the door, he took one last look at the building behind him. Laughter echoed from inside, but it no longer bothered him. He had come full circle. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to prove. Ethan started the engine, and the powerful hum filled the air. It reminded him of the nights years ago when he used to drive away from town, broke and hopeless, crying into the darkness. That road had once felt endless, filled with shame and pain. Now it felt different, open, wide, and free. He pressed his foot on the gas and began the drive home, the headlights cutting through the quiet night. The road was almost empty. The same streets that once made him feel small now felt peaceful. He passed familiar places. The gas station where he used to park his car to sleep, the coffee shop where he once looked for job listings, the courthouse he could never forget. None of them hurt anymore. They were just parts of a story that no longer controlled him. As the town disappeared in his rearview mirror, Ethan felt a strange mix of peace and sadness. He wasn't angry at his parents anymore. The confrontation had given him something more powerful than revenge, closure. He realized he didn't need their apology. Even if they never said they were sorry, he would still be fine. Because his success, his strength, his peace, none of it was for them. It was for himself. He rolled down the window, letting the wind rush against his face. It felt clean, freeing. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from his past. He was simply moving forward. The pain that had once defined him had become the fuel that built him. After driving for hours, Ethan pulled over by a quiet stretch of road that overlooked the city lights in the distance. He sat there for a long time, just watching. He thought about how far he had come, from sleeping in a car to driving one worth more than he ever imagined. But more than the money or the success, he was grateful for the peace in his heart. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "I'm done looking back." Then he smiled, started the car again, and drove toward. Years later, Ethan found himself sitting on the balcony of his Miami home, the ocean stretching out endlessly before him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was peaceful, the kind of peace he used to dream about when he had nothing. Life was quiet now. The company was long sold, the noise of success had faded, and all that was left was the calm after the storm. He often thought about how different things could have been if his parents had stood by him. But instead of bitterness, those thoughts now brought understanding. He had learned something powerful through all the pain, that betrayal doesn't just break you, it shapes you. It forces you to rebuild yourself from the ground up, stronger than before. Sometimes friends came to visit. They would ask about his story, how he went from being accused of fraud to becoming a millionaire. He never gave them a dramatic version. He just told it the way it happened, quietly, truthfully. "People left," he would say, "and I thought that was the end." But it was really the beginning. He started speaking at small business events and youth gatherings. At first, he was nervous, but the more he spoke, the more he realized his story mattered. He told them how loneliness had once been his biggest fear, but later became his greatest teacher. He explained how failure and betrayal had taught him what strength truly meant. People listened, and many walked away with tears in their eyes, seeing a bit of their own pain in his story. Ethan didn't try to sound like a hero. He was honest about his mistakes and the nights he almost gave up. He talked about the emptiness, the silence, and how he learned that waiting for others to save you only keeps you stuck. "No one's coming," he'd say. "You save yourself. And once you do, no one can take that strength away from you." He didn't mention his parents often, but when he did, it was without anger. "They taught me something too," he would admit. "They showed me that love can fail, and that's okay, because it taught me how to love myself enough to keep going." After every talk, people would thank him, calling him an inspiration. But Ethan never felt like one. He just saw himself as someone who survived and learned. Each time he spoke, he hoped that maybe someone in the audience, someone who felt abandoned or lost, would realize they still had power left inside them. As he sat watching the waves that evening, he smiled to himself. His story wasn't about revenge or proving people wrong anymore. It was about growth, healing, and freedom. Betrayal had hurt him deeply, but it had also built the man he became. Someone unbreakable, calm, and complete. And that, he knew, was the real victory. The horizon, leaving the ghosts of his past behind for good.